here for the end of our session. We have 15 minutes left, and here are these two pieces. The first you can see on the board up there is by another Russian composer, Modest Mussorgsky. It's called Polish Ox Cart, from his work Pictures at an Exhibition. What happened was he had a friend. The friend died. The friend was an artist. The friend left these pictures as an homage to the painter. Mussorgsky sat down and tried to create a musical response to each of these paintings that were on display. Now, this is a piece that's always interested me because the painting is very pedestrian. It's of an old Polish ox cart sitting on some godforsaken road in rural Russia somewhere. So how do you make that work as music? How do you turn that visual image into music? How do you turn that into a sort of live sonic scape? And I should say at the outset, I'm going to prejudice your listening here just a little bit. I hear this as me being in the center and this ox cart starting, could it start either side, doesn't matter. Everybody moves left to right, so I'm going to hear this moving left to right. It comes in front of me, almost rolls over top of me, runs me down, and then disappears to my right. So, as we listen to this, you think about what are the techniques by which Mussorgsky creates this musical action scene. You should be able to come up with two pretty good ideas here, two pretty good answers. All right, here we go. Nice and loud. The instrument that is playing is a low tuba, low brass instrument. It doesn't sound much like a tuba because it's actually playing in the higher register of the instrument, but it is a tuba. The strings, turn it up just a little bit. Strings come in with a counter idea, complementary idea. Okay, give me one pretty straightforward way this happened. What did he do there? Yes, young lady out here, please. Crescendo. Okay, crescendo. From beginning to end? Yeah, so like a giant wedge. So that's why the cart seems to be in front of you. And so we're talking about musical volume here. It started very quietly. It built up to this huge center in which we had the bass drum pounding away there and the snare drum coming in to give the effect that the entire earth is rattling at that particular point. And then as it passed by you, the thunder passed by you and off you went into the distance, quietly into the distance. And it was, we'll come back to that, but how did that happen? We'll listen to the end of that in just one moment. It's kind of a disintegration of the sound at the end, a disintegration of the sound at the end. So let's pick, so that's one big way this happened. That's probably the big ticket item here. There's another way, a more subtle way. Any thoughts about that? Yes? Yes, the instrumentation. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it starts just with like, I guess you said the tuba and like really low instruments, and then when it gets to the middle, the strings come in, and then the percussion comes in.
Great.
It starts going away and then it disappears.
Right. So there's a kind of wedge shape with regard to the instruments too. He starts with the lowest instruments, and then goes to the high instruments and then back to low instruments at the end. Let's just review. Well, no, we won't review this. Let's not review that, okay? We don't have time to review that. But let's go on to say the following, that what Mussorgsky knew there was a very basic principle of acoustics. And what is that principle? Yeah? I beg your pardon? Well, to some extent. I'm going to give an example of that, of the train kind of going by you and the sound heading off in the other direction. Yes, to some extent it is that, yes. But what I was thinking about here is this idea that the lowest sounds create, or the longest sound waves, and they last the longest. The lowest sounds create the largest sound waves, and they last the longest. The lowest sounds last the longest. Why might this be the case? So here, not having too much confidence in our slides this morning, I went ahead and put this one up on the board here. Here is one pitch. Here is a pitch of a string an octave higher. So you can see it this way. As you probably know, if you take a long string and pluck it, it's going to take that long string a long time to pass that sort of cycle, if you will, just one pass through that cycle. The string half a length will pass through that cycle 2 times, so that you can kind of graph these up here as one long low sound or one faster vibrating sound an octave higher. So again, low sounds or low frequencies travel farther. Now you've experienced this in your own life. You're standing in a street corner here in New Haven. In the distance, what do you hear? An automobile approaching with a souped up audio system in it. And what sound do you hear at the very first? Vroom, 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 vroom. That kind of thing. Then maybe, and then maybe some kind of melody will come in. And then it'll all come together right in front of you, and it'll kind of disappear in the distance. You're at a football game. You've probably experienced this too. The band is marching on the field. Suddenly they do the Doppler effect, where they turn their backs to you, in a way, and they're playing away from you. And you hear very little sound. What instrumental sound do you hear? Boom, boom, boom. The bass drum and the tuba, or in the marching band would be a sousaphone, they would call it. The bass drum and tuba. So Mussorgsky knew this kind of thing, and because he was a professional musician, and was playing off of it to create this rather unusual and remarkable musical soundscape here. Okay, I have 5 minutes left. I'd like to do one last piece. It's another piece by Richard Strauss. It kind of brings us to the end of Richard Strauss, our discussion of Richard Strauss. We'll say goodbye to him here in our course. It's called Death and Transfiguration, Death and Transfiguration. And I hear this as a companion piece, a kind of pendant to the Zarathustra. One sort of opens up the beginning of life here, and the other closes it down through a referencing of death. There's an interesting anecdote about Strauss, and that is that on his deathbed he said to his daughter Alice, he said, Alice, it's the funniest thing. Dying is exactly as I composed it in Death and Transfiguration. What an odd thing to say. But in any event, here's how this works. We've been talking about this overtone series with Zarathustra. Eva played this overtone series. He's basically working up to the upper partials. Now he's going to work down the partials. He's going to close it back down here with death. And he's going to close it back down using a process that we frequently encounter in music, and that is this idea of dissonance resolving to consonance. Here's a dissonance. Here's a consonance. There are precise technical reasons why these are the way they are, but let me try to cut to the chase here. With dissonant intervals, they tend to be frequencies that are sounding right next to each other, very close by frequencies. They sound dissonant. If you allow a little bit of spacing, a little more space between your frequencies, they're a little bit farther apart, then you can move from closeness to spacing and you get the consonants. Generally speaking, dissonant intervals have ratios such as 9 to 8 for the whole step or 17 to 16 for the half step. They're irrational numbers, and these irrational numbers like to move to rational numbers. They like to move to consonances. They like to move to intervals that are based on things such as 2 to 1 and 3 to 2 or maybe 4 to 3. So that's the principle of this idea of dissonance resolving to consonance. So we're going to listen now to the end of Strauss's Death and Transfiguration, the death here. And again, we've got the idea of the octave, then the fifth, then the fourth. We're working up farther and farther in these partials, and we've got some of these notes right next to each other, and they want to move to the stable note. So we're going to be hearing a lot of a note right above the tonic wanting to pull down to that tonic note. We're going to hear a lot of a note right above the dominant wanting to pull down to the dominant. So let's listen to this. We have about 3 minutes, I think. We'll hear it, and I'll comment a bit as we go. Okay, first question. What string technique is being used here? Tremolo, just sawing away there. Just working with the 4-note motive here. Whoa, strange little dissonant chord there, resolving to consonance. And here it's all just tonic, just the basic primordial note upon which all these other tones are built. Okay, so that's Richard Strauss's approach to death. Not particularly relevant